यत्रैव मनोमदीयं तत्रैव तव स्वरूपम्।
हरि ओम तत्स। जय गुरु। यं शैवाः समुपासते शिव इति ब्रह्मेति वेदान्तिनो बौद्धा बुद्ध इति प्रमाणपटवः कर्तेति नैयायिका अर्हन्नित्यथ जैनशासनरता कर्मेति मीमांसका सोऽयं वो विदधातु वाञ्छितफलं त्रैलोक्यनाथो हरिः। सोऽयं वो विदधातु वाञ्छितफलं त्रैलोक्यनाथो हरिः। मदीय हृदयाकाशे सदानन्दमयो गुरुः उदेतु सततं सम्यक् अज्ञान तिमिरारुणः। हरि हरि ओम तत्स। हरि ओम तत्स। जय गुरु। We shall have the chorus recitation of Omkara 3 times as usual. Take your pose for it. This is what I generally tell people. Interlock your fingers and put them on your lap. Sit comfortably erect. Close your eyes. Open the mouth as well as the heart and join in the recitation. Hari, Hari. When you recite, you must have a feeling of such an expansion that you want this chorus recitation to permeate the whole universe globe, generating and unleashing its benedictory influences to all the creatures of the world. So it is not merely a personal sadhana and austerity, it is also meant at the same time to give effect to the maximum measure of benevolence. Harihi, Harihi, Harihi Om Tats. Hari, Hari Om Tats. All of you are keen listeners. Maybe all of you are also seekers. In spite of this fact, I am going to confront you now. What is that? Yesterday I spoke a little about Ashtavakra Samhita. In that Samhita, sage Ashtavakra was exposing the supreme truth to Janaka all of a sudden. And whatever was to be told, whatever is to be realized, both are conveyed in one particular verse. It shows you in a ready-hand manner the dimension and magnitude of your own inner presence. the sentient presence in your body which animates and activates your otherwise inert body. That presence, its dimension, its magnitude is clearly revealed. Revelation is in the form of words. Every word consists of an idea. An idea is a unit or a measure of knowledge. So when you hear a word properly, automatically in your within, in the level of the intelligence, the knowledge conveyed by the word is instantly grasped. If you are not able to grasp it, I can only say that you are not intelligent, or you don't have intelligence, or you have not applied it properly. What did Ashtavakara say? He said, Na prithvi na jalam na agnihi, na vayur dyaurna va bhavan, esham sakshinam atmanam chidrupam vidhi muktaye. Shall I recite it for you? All of you join me, follow me. Na prithvi na jalam na agnihi,
न पृथ्वी न जलं नाग्निः
na vayuhu
न वायुः
dyaurna va bhavan,
द्यौर्न वा भवान्
esham sakshinam
येषां साक्षिणमात्मानं
chidrupam vidhi muktaye.
चिद्रूपं विद्धि मुक्तये.
This is what sage Ashtavakara in Treta Yuga told Janaka. Now this is what your Swamiji is telling all of you in a very dear manner. The way Janaka understood, why should you not understand? Give me an answer from your intelligence level. The entire world is divided into two. On the one side stands the visible external world or worldliness. That is consisting of 5 constituents, which are called Panchabhutas. Things which have become, having become. This is the meaning of the word Bhuta in Sanskrit. So altogether, there are 5 becomings in this visible world. One is the solid earth. Another is the fluid water. So solidity is there, fluidity is there, liquidity is there, then gaseousness is there. Now these are the 3 forms of substance in the whole world, in the Drishya Prapancha, the visible universe. The next one is fire in the form of energy, light and heat. And the 5th element is the ground. You cannot describe it whether it is matter or energy. But that is the one that has given rise to the 4 and is sustaining and hosting them. By referring to these 5 items, I have completed the whole visible creation. Do you understand it? Do you understand it? Do you accept it? The entire universe is covered by referring to Panchabhutas. Now all these Panchabhutas stand in a way that we can look at them. So whatever I look at, whatever I perceive becomes my object. So the entire world, it is not the little world made by the earth. It is the entire world in front of or around your senses. The whole world consists of Panchabhutas, and all of them are an object of perception for me. So there is nothing in the outside world which is not an object and which is not included in these 5. Is it clear? Are you coming with me? Now, there is one other factor. What is the other factor? Yourself. Yourself. Who is looking at the world? Whenever you use the word object, the object cannot become the object all by itself. Anything becomes an object only with reference to the subject. So when you refer to the world as an object, immediately you should think, to which subject does the world become an object? That is why I said, the entire existence, the entire imaginable things, they are divided into two categories. One is the ken of the objects, another is the subject which looks at them, perceives them. Now you tell me, my dear souls, every one of you should tell me, are you the object or are you the subject? Whenever you are living in this world, looking into the world objects, interacting with the world, early in the morning you get up, open your eyes, you see the roof. Then you get up. In the process you have looked at the wall, looked at the floor, looked at your cot. Then you go to the toilet, you come back. So our interactions with the world commence just when we wake up. Who woke up? You woke up. Independently or with somebody's help. In the same manner I slept, I also wake up. So waking up is an individual process that takes place in me in the morning when I wake up. In my waking up, world has no part to play. After waking up, the world becomes an object for me. Automatically it means that I am the subject of the world. The world can be an object only with reference to a subject, and the subject cannot be the object. It cannot be matter, it cannot be energy. So it should be supra-material and supra-energial. Is there such a thing? Yes, it is within our body, where we have mind and thoughts, feelings and emotions, reason and inquiry, knowledge and memory. All these things are inside the body. None of them is a property of any matter or energy. So there is a presence within our body, associated with the body, which animates the body and activates the body. It is that activation that results in my reference to the world and seeing the world as it is. The world is endful or endless? It is endless. Who says that the world is endless? Did the earth talk to you? Water and air talk to you? Did the fire talk to you? Did space talk to you? No. Then where from do you get the idea of endlessness? That is your own imagination, your own assessment. You have made your own standards for knowledge, various foundations for knowledge. And by using the knowledge, you say, there are limited things. There can be something unlimited also. The world cannot be classified as limited. It is endless in nature. Endless in nature. That infinitude of the world, endless magnitude of the world, is not a concept which your mind, which your intelligence has evolved. So in the perception of the world, who or what counts? Does the world count? Or you, the subject of the world, who makes it an object and you perceive it and you give your own descriptions to your perceptions? I come back to the same point. There are altogether two factors in our life. One is object, another is the subject. The world certainly falls in the category of object. Now the question is, what or where is the subject? Search in the whole world. Search inside the earth, inside water, inside air, inside fire, inside space. Can you ever find a sentient presence in any of these Panchabhutas? Obviously the answer is no. Answer is no. No. At the same time you are feeling sentience. You are sentient. So what is your position now? Are you included in the object world or you stand different from it, outside it, to be called the subject of all these objects. Now, if the object world is infinite in dimension, and this infinitude is an assessment which you have made by virtue of your own perception, analysis, and assessment. Tell me, who is the author of this infinitude? Is the world the author? Or you the subject perceiver? So you stand as the subject of the world, and the world stands as an object before you. Can at any point in your life the subject become the object, or object becomes the subject? Object become the subject. The two are, if one is eastward, the other is westward. Object is object. Subject is different from it. The subject can never become the object, nor the object can ever become the subject. Now, what have you found by looking into earth, water, air, fire, and akasha, space? That all of them are objects, and I stand distinctly as their subject. My subject position cannot be adversely affected by any object. I am never going to become the object. A thing cannot change its original nature. So I am the subject and I will continue to be the subject. If you are the subject, whatever happens to the objects, in what way is your subjectness affected? Tell me. First of all, I ask you, are you the world? No. What is your dimension? What is your status? I am different from the world. But I have got the capacity to see the world. So the seeing is done by me. Assessments are done by me. That the world is endless is my assessment. So all the ideas crop up from within you, from the subject sphere. That subject never becomes the object. You were born a subject. You are now present as a subject. You will continue to be a subject. And when the body dies, body will die. Your subject nature will never be affected. That is what he says. Understand you to be the Sakshi, the witness of these objects. At any point of time, when a child is born to you, you don't become the child. The child remains an object for you. When you have married, your married partner is an object for you. Your parents are an object for you. When you see a personal form of God, that perceived God is an object for you. You are the subject. Do any number of interactions with the object. Tell me now, as a child, not as an intelligent man, can your subject nature be affected by any interaction? I see a crore of things. All of them are objects for me. I never become the object. I hear a number of words. They are audible objects for me. None of them is me. I am the subject. My subject position alone enables me to live and interact in this world, and my interactions are not with me but with other things which are diametrically opposed to me. I am the subject and the others are objects. If in the object world your body was born, were you born? Tell me. Your body was born. You built a house, were you built? You bought a flat, were you bought? You have a child, have you become the child? You wear dress, do you become the dress? You speak words, do you become the words? You think, do you become the thoughts? You memorize, do you become the memory? What have you become after having been born? You have never become anything. You are the witness of the process of becoming. You remain I. It is a sentient presence. The entire world is object and object alone. I call it objectude. In the whole objectude, you have no place. The entire objectude is floating in your mind. The mind takes imprint of the objectude and the mind fosters it, preserves it for a while and then drops it also. So the I position, the subject position of yours, namely the witness. You are the witness, Janaka, and you never become the witnessed. When the body was born, were you born? Tell me, my dear souls, were you born? Your body as an object was born. You as the subject were never born. And the body has grown. You have not grown. Everything takes place to the object. Why don't you understand it? It is for the intelligence, human intelligence, to analyze in this manner and to understand it. So everything that you refer to in the world in the form of interactions, interactional consequences, results, outcomes, whatever they are only in the object ken. Object ken. And are you the object? No. What are you? You are the witness of all the objects. So understand, Janaka, understand, my listeners, that your status and position are that of a subject, those of a subject. Subject. Anything that takes place in your life, suppose grief has affected you. In the affectation of grief, your position is, grief is the object and you are the subject. Suppose you enjoyed something very pleasurable, that pleasurableness remains as an object and you are the witness, the subject. So you are a witness, the subject of all experiences, all fates, all plights, all kinds of transformations, everything. To understand this, which scientific laboratory do you want? You require the laboratory of your own body, senses, mind and intelligence, that's all. We already have it. Conduct the experiment what you want, enter into it and do the research and come gloriously to say, I am only a witness, I am only a witness, I am the witness, I never become the witness, the world is witnessed, I am the witness, the world never becomes me and I never become the world. You may do whatever you like, you may get educated, you may get married, you may have children, you may have a job in the United States, you may have ample income, you may have property here and there. By all these things, my dear souls, not a naya paisa has been added to you, the subject. None of these things you are going to take when the body falls, if at all. None of these things. The money you have is an object. The wealth you have is an object. The children you have are an object. You are the witness. You are the witness. You conduct the marriage. You don't become the marriage. You only become the witness. 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 Witness of external things and internal things. External things are sensory objects. Internal things are mento-intellectual creations. Thought is a mind creation. Understanding is an intelligence creation. Are you with me? We have only mento-intellectual creations and products. Mento-intellectual creations and products. Every sight becomes so only when the sight is imprinted by the mind in itself. It should be converted by the mind into a mental imprint. Everything should be converted into a mental imprint. And this imprint is getting formed within your body not in the sphere of matter and energy, in the sphere of sentience. And that sentience cannot be touched by matter, touched by energy. It cannot be made into a process. You cannot implicate it in a process. That is why Gita says, what does it say? What does it say? Achedyoyam, adahyoyam, akledyo, ashosyevacha, nityaha sarvagadasthanuhu, achaloyam, sanatanaha. My dear souls, sing this sloga. Sing it, lifting your hands. And roam about in your own room singing this. Achedyoyam, I cannot be penetrated by a weapon. Adahyoyam, I cannot be burned by fire. Ashosyevacha, I cannot be dried by wind. Nityaha, sarvagataha, sthanuhu. These are the adjectives of the sentience, adjectives of the subject. Nityaha, ever present. Sarvagataha, pervading and permeating everywhere. Sthanuhu, absolutely immovable. Absolutely immovable. The entire creation is movable. There is only one immovable presence, the subject, and that is within your body, you. Nityas sarvagata sthanuhu achaloyam. It does not move or vibrate. There is no dislodgement from one base to the other. No movement is there. Sanatanaha, that is eternal. My dear souls, all of you are eternal by the very fact that you have had a human birth. Don't look for eternality. Find it, realize it. In the manner in which Sage Ashtavakra initiates Janaka Maharaja into. He has referred to the whole world by referring to Panchabhutas. And he says, you are the witness of these. Tell me now, what is your witness dimension? Is it a mustard? Is it a mountain? Is it even the seas of the world? Or it is even beyond and transcending the endless space? Why don't you dance? What more do you want except this explanation? If a torchlight is there, and by pressing the button, it can reveal the entire expanse of the world. What do you call the torch? Is it like an ordinary one? It has got an infinite capacity. The far point of the eye is infinity. You place a sizable object at infinite distance, the naked eye can see. So what is the power of vision the eye has? Infinite. This infinitude, who created and who preserves? That is the sentience within the body. The fetus grows by multiplication of cells. Originally it is one cell. It multiplies. When it comes here, it forms itself into the eye, into the ear, the tongue, the gum, the nose. It's all a single cell multiplying and becoming. So can you imagine the power? And when the child is born, it is gifted already with all faculties by virtue of which he can perceive the infinitely varietal world and interact with it. And the whole manufacture was over in a period of 7 to 8 months. What do you think of it? We are looking into the world to find the cause. But the cause is right within you. Experiment into your own within. Delve into it and tell me what is the dimension. If you can get hold of a camera, insert it through the mouth and take a picture of the sentience. Never. The sentience is to be perceived by the intelligence. Not by the eyes, not by the ears, not by the nose. It can be perceived only by intelligence. And the entire satsang, the lecture I am giving, is to sharpen your intelligence. Make the intelligence subtle enough, perceptive enough, perceptive enough, perceptive enough, until at last you will say, I am the perceiver, the subject, and I have nothing to do with the perceived, the objects. And as a perceiver, I am single and singular. Single and singular. It is in front of this perceiver, I, that the whole universe appears to be infinite, endless. So the endlessness is what? Is a concept, is a pratyaya, is an idea which my mind has formed. Like I say finite, I also say infinite. Like I say zero, I say infinity. Both of them are equally ideas. World is an idea. God is a counter idea. Body is an idea. Soul is another idea. Go into the ideational process and reach at the very source. You have reached at the source of everything. Did you ever think of all these things yesterday after listening to me? Janaka was told by Ashtavakra, and he was progressing, grasping, realizing, Esham sakshinam atmanam. If you are the witness of all the objects, naturally you are not an object. Shall I write on the board? If you are a witness of the object, automatically it means you are not the object. If you are not the object, what else can you be? You tell me. So many scientists are there listening to me. Tell me, what is there you can think of other than the objects of the world? There can only be one counter to the object, that is the subject. And that subject witness you are. Subject witness you are. As the witness of all these objects, will you ever undergo a transformation as the objects do? No, 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 no. Stand out and then say, I cannot be transformed by anything. I am untransforming. I am non-transitory. I am not fleeting. I am changeless. The body is mortal. I am immortal. The body is born. I am unborn. The body will die. I am deathless. The body is limited. I am unlimited. Simply because of the fact that I am a witness. You need not understand all these magnitudes now. At least you will agree with me that you are the witness of the world. And that is sufficient for me. Never liken you with anything of the world. Never liken you with anything of the world. The world is an object, inert by nature, and you are the subject, the witness. You only witness. When you are suffering, you are the witness of the suffering. When you are enjoying, you are the witness of the enjoying. When you have a doubt, you are the witness of the doubting process. When you have knowledge, you are a witness to the knowledge. When you become liberated, you will be a witness to your liberation. When you are bounded under bondage, you are a witness to your bondage. My dear souls, our words and vocabulary are limitless. We cannot be constricted or obstructed by anybody. When you see God, you make God an object and you remain the subject different from Him. You are the witness of external and internal things alike. So can you reach a stage where there is nothing to witness? Therefore, your position as a witness ceases and you go to a level of transcendence where the object and the subject distinction will not be there. What is that wonderful position? Where neither an object remains and hence no subject also. There is a presence which became the subject and then looked at the object. That primordial presence you read, which is transcendental to everything else. This is jnana, my dear souls. This is jnana, my dear souls. This is knowledge, and this is what you have to realize it. How will you realize it? Not with your nose, not with your fingertip, not with your eyes and ears, but with the purity of the mind and the sharpness of your intelligence. Sharpness of your intelligence. When I say there will reach a time when there will be nothing for you to witness, all thoughts will subside, all feelings will go away, because no objects are there, relatively the subject also becomes redundant. So you reach a state of reality, which we can from here say transcendental. Left to itself, it is not transcendental. It remains itself. You have to realize this Chidrupa. Chidrupam vidhi muktaye. Katham jnanam avapnodi. Katham muktir bhavishyadi. These were the questions of Janaka. How can I attain knowledge? That knowledge which will lead me to mukti, liberation. That knowledge is Chidrupam vidhi. Please stop everything else. Stop even reading. You have to understand the Chidrupa. When you read, you have the inert book with you. You have the inert eyes with you. We don't need anything. Close your eyes. Go to a room if you want. Close the doors and the windows. Remain alone there. Let there be pitch darkness so that you cannot even see the body. And can you delve into your within? As a result of which, all the inner processes of the mind and the intelligence, all of them will come to a state of dissolution. Can such a state be possible if you ask me? Yes. Every day you are sleeping. But that is biologically induced. This consciously you have to invite and generate. That is why meditative absorption is necessary. The whole of 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita is devoted only to meditation. And in the meditation, what does Krishna say? Na kinchitapi chintaye. Withdraw, 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 until at last you reach a stage where you don't have to think anything. You should think, but what? Nothing. Na kinchitapi chintaye. In order to realize the witness, you have to think. All your thoughts are of objects. The moment a thought arises, it becomes an object for you, the thinker. Now you have to go into the thinkerhood, the thinking substance, where from the multiplication arose. What is the multiplication? The thinker, thinking and thought. What is that wonderful substance, wonderful singular source from which all the three have arisen? It can be found out. Just like you are dealing with the objects, dabbling with the objects, you can also deal with the subject. The mind dealing with both is the same. Tell the mind to probe into the subjectivity of your being. Tell the mind, I am not interested in your processes. Please stop everything. The mind will simply oblige you. We are pampering the mind and we are asking it to think. If children are asked to go to the temple and spend 5, 10, 15 minutes, what is the purpose? The purpose is to train their mind to be in quietude. They should go to the temple, spend some time circumambulating there, fold their hands, observe the arati there. Let them spend about half an hour in the temple. That is the ground on which they are going to build their meditative process. We have nothing. All of you are educated and we are only objects. Array, the entire object is registered by the subject. Why don't you tell the children a little about the subject? We call university. University. What is this university? I am wondering. I looked into the dictionary. I could not find a proper definition. A university should be a place where the art and the science of the universe, the universal magnitude or universal appearance should be taught. The universe is an object, and the whole object appears or gets reflected in the subject. So naturally in university education, the subject education is a must. But do we have it? We don't. Why? Are we wise in not having it? Or are we foolish in not having it? Answer me boldly. You are alone the witness and witness alone. But nobody talks about this witness. Everybody talks about the object. No reference to the subject at all. We are taught only in English grammar, subject and object. So, esham sakshinam atmanam chidrupam vidhi muktaye. You have to know this chidrupa. When I say witness, you can understand. You are not able to know that it is chidrupa. It is consciousness. So that consciousness, you will have to develop your understanding, experience until you are able to grasp it. Grasp it. Grasp it. Tell me, what sleeps in you? Is the body sleeping? Or something inside the body goes to sleep? Bodily processes have never stopped. The heart is pumping. The lungs are doing respiration. The blood is circulating. Everything, digestion is going on. So bodily, you are not sleeping. The sleeping itself is of something inside the body. You go and lie. Maybe for half an hour you have not slept. You are conscious of the body, everything. After some time, everything is gone. So who sleeps? What sleeps? How it sleeps? Chidrupam vidhi muktaye. Understand that there is something different from materiality, energiality, something supra-material, supra-energial, in the form of a transcendental sentience. Sentience. Consciousness. We use the word consciousness. Medical people use it in a different sense. I would like to use it in a literary manner, particularly for our purpose. Consciousness by itself cannot be defined because there is no way of accessing it as we access the objects. It is a subjective phenomenon. Actually, in good English, it's not phenomenon, it is noumenon. Now I shall define consciousness. Consciousness is that. I can only use the relative pronoun and attempt to give you a definition. Consciousness is that presence by virtue of which one is made conscious of other things as well as oneself. Consciousness is that presence by virtue of which I know I am. And I also know I have a body. And I am in the world. So something in me reveals myself and also other things to which I am relating, with which I am interacting. So that is that wonderful presence. That wonderful presence, Chidrupa, you know. And by knowledge, liberation results. Liberation does not result from any other process or outcome. You now say, I am bound and I need liberation. When you understand the Chit, you will understand, I am Chit and therefore never bound. Naturally, liberation becomes redundant for me. Then what is my state then? It is a state which is beyond bandhana and moksha. It is a state beyond bondage and liberation. As I told you, inquiring into the subject, when all the objects disappear, then the relative subject also becomes unnecessary. Then you reach a transcendental presence. That transcendent presence. Chidrupam vidhi muktaye. Therefore, what should you do? Yadi deham prithakritya chidi vishramya tishtasi adhunaiva sukhi shamto bandhamukto bhavishyasi. Sit in a place. Yadi deham prithakritya. You separate the body. Now, this is not a physical process. You cannot separate the body from where? From where? You cannot separate it. The body is a mass, it is a matter-energy aggregate. So this separation is to be done in your mind and intelligence level. So sit in a place, close your eyes, and then separate the body. I am not the body which is the object. I am the subject which experiences the body. So the body is experienced. The experiencer is different. So, I am not the experienced. I am the experiencee. As the experiencer, the subject, I am different from the experience, the body. Do this process of ratiocination. I am sometimes feeling it reluctant to speak because when I speak this, all of you will feel that Swamiji is intellectually something very, very painful for me to listen to. I am not an intellectual and I don't want to be one. But I would like to know and explain things in a very simple manner. So, yadi deham prithakritya, in the level of the consciousness, in the level of your mind, you separate body, the objects. In your mind, there is no body. Body is only an idea. And that idea makes the body an object. Automatically, there must be a subject. Your interest is not to run after the body. So, separate the body and keep quiet. Chidi vishramya tishtasi. What is left aside then when all the objects, thoughts, feelings, emotions, memory, imagination, all are left? Then there is a source of all these things. Source. When all thought processes cease, what is left aside? That which became the thought process. That which gave rise to the thought process. That stuff should be different from the thought process. So, there you remain. Never go in for a thought involvement. Never enter into any perceiving process, analyzing process, assessing process. Nothing. Leave everything. Until at last you find nothing more to leave. Chidi vishramya tishtasi. And keep quiet. Oh, the source of all thought. The source of all emotions. That means the source of the entire world and its perception. I have reached, leaving all objects of perception, imprints of objects, the imprinting process, and therefore the mind. Leaving everything, I have reached a wonderful state of poise, where the dwell processes never spring. Chidi vishramya tishtasi. Will you be able to smile after getting into that state? The moment you open, the world will be there. Will you be allured by the world? Will there be anything fascinating you? Either gold or property or anything beautiful and attractive? None of these objects can enter your mind and give you delight or contentment, my dear souls. The objects remain separate from us. It has nothing to do with us. It may have something to do with the body. We feel hungry and have our food. We put it into the mouth. It goes into the alimentary canal. It never goes into the consciousness that you are. All these are object requirements and object processes. You remain the subject. When the object imprint is gone, you cannot be called even a subject. So you reach the transcendental level of consciousness. And there you must be able to rest and poise. You must be able to feel your poise there. Paryapta kamasya kritatmanastu ihaiva sarve praviliyanti kamaha, says Upanishad. All desires vanish here. They become extinct. What is there to be desired? Can the witness desire anything? Whenever he desires, it is something other than himself, which is of no consequence to him. My dear souls, this is jnana. This is jnana. This is jnana yajna. Shreyan dravyamayad yajnad. Jnana yajna parantapa. Sarvam karmakhilam partha. Jnane parisamapyade, says Krishna, says Bhagavad Gita. Dravyamayad yajnad shreyan. All our material sacrifices, all the Vedic yagas and yajnas, better than them, superior to them. Shreyan dravyamayat yajnat jnana yajna parantapa. That jnana yajna, that is what I am doing now. You are all hearing now. My speaking and your hearing together become the jnana yajna, not by speaking alone. Katham jnanam avapnoti, katham muktir bhavishyati. Ashtavakara is giving out that knowledge, asking Janaka to absorb it, assimilate it, and become it, and therefore be liberated. Dharma dharmau sukham dukkham manasani nate vibho na kartasi na bhoktasi mukta evasi sarvada. See the profound words he is using. Dharma dharmau sukham dukkham manasani nate vibho. My dear Janaka, you are a vibhu. You are not a jiva, you are not a body. Dharma dharmau. The differences like dharma and adharma, propriety and impropriety, sukham dukkham, happiness and unhappiness, manasani, they are mind creations, mind products, mind delusions. Nate vibho. They don't touch you. They are not for you. Na kartasi. You are not a doer or a performer. Na bhoktasi. You cannot experience also anything. You are only a witness. Mukta evasi sarvada. Therefore you are ever liberated, my dear son. Ever liberated. You don't have to liberate you at all. Understand that you are unliberatable. For me, liberation? What liberation? From what? I am the witness. I am the witness of bondage. I will be the witness of liberation also. For me, there is no liberation. Mukta evasi sarvada. So, mukti is not an attainment which results from a process and outcome. It is a realization. It is an understanding. I cannot use the word perception there. It is a realization. Real and eyes realize. Become the real. I shall stop now. We shall continue the discussion tomorrow.
Pranam Swamiji, there are many questions. The first question we are taking up today is from Tara. She writes, "My Sadar Pranams to Pujya Swamiji's feet. My question is that in the background of Samatva, how should we take decisions in the Vyavahara, the outside world? Because sometimes we want to take decisions like this thing or this person is right or this one is wrong. In this context, what is the meaning of Samatva? Swamiji, please tell me the meaning of real Samatva. And if you can please tell us about how Raja Janaka ruled his kingdom after attaining knowledge and Samatva. It will be very helpful to us about how we should be in the Vyavaharika world with Samatva. Thank you very much. Yours obediently, Tara.
This is virtually a discussion on how a man of realization will become functional. This Swamiji is an expert in discussing that aspect of life. See, whenever I read a text, even say Viveka Chudamani, I was not interested in the textuality of the text. I was interested, what is Shankara going to say about the man of realization? So I was always looking into the last portions of his writing. Similarly, how a man of realization will live in this world, move. Who is a Sthitaprajna and what will be a Sthitadhi like? So you can read about 17 to 18 verses from Bhagavad Gita, 2nd chapter, where the Sthitadhi and the Sthitaprajna are described in their interactional role. I am happy that you raised this question. My answer to you will be, it can be answered in many ways. One answer that I feel like giving you now is, Janaka was a king like any other ordinary king. He must have learned archery. He must also have learned the science and practice of rule, any other subject of interest. But after this illumination, there was a startling difference in Janaka Maharaja. All his previous knowledge covered only the objects of the world. Even medical science is a study of the object body. So till then, Janaka knew only about the object. This knowledge gave him the one plus factor necessary in life. Other than the objects, the world has, or our life has, only one factor called the subject, about which all people are ignorant. So Janaka also knew about the subject. Just like other people know about the object, he also knew about the subject. The subject knowledge was such that, are you following me, my dear questioner? The subject knowledge is such that it gives you, what shall I say? The experience of abundance, fullness, the experience of an inner inundation, as a result of which no desire sprouts, no fear crops, and no opposition survives. Psychologically, you become stable, poised, full, abundant, ecstatic. You become an embodiment of magnificence, superfluity. Ordinary kings had only the power of rule and the knowledge of rule. Janaka had the knowledge of the other, the subject. And it was such a wonderful knowledge that makes him full. So at no point of time he had anything like a desire, a hatred, a competition, a jealousy, or anything of this kind. His intelligence was dazzling with the splendor of the subject. His mind was floating in the ecstasy of desire extinction. All sense of possessiveness vanished from him. Let people possess me. I am not going to possess anything. The feeling that I have done, I will do, I will suffer the consequences or glory of my action, all this ego totally vanished. So there was full ego effacement. Possessiveness was replaced by dispossessiveness. And no desire of any kind was there. These were the additional glories. And these glories were such that it made the entire life and the task of rule easy, comfortable, happy, and a soft cake. My dear souls, please understand, ours is a great country where a few rulers, for having ruled the country well, they felt so sorry, they left the throne and became ascetics. You know what hurt them most? A good ruler will have to punish people as well as reward people. And in those days, punishment will be beheading. There is no court and judgment, etc. So they had to meet hard punishments. And as long as people are not good, punishment will be more. So the reward occasions will be less and punishing occasions will be more. And sometimes it so happens the punishment becomes wrong, which comes to light later. One king, having come to know that he has killed a man wrongly, went and committed suicide. He could not tolerate his mind, that guilt. So many kings ruled the kingdom and abandoned the rule because of the severity of punishment they inflicted upon many people. The mind got hurt. Janaka was able to rule comfortably and happily. And there is a proverbial statement about Janaka. What is that? If the whole Mithila is burned, Janaka loses nothing. Nothing. If the whole Mithila is burnt, I lose nothing, he said. This is what you become. Are you prepared for it? I think all of you are happy with a small house or a flat, a couple of children, a married partner, some fixed deposit. Okay. You cannot think of a higher dimension. I feel very sorry. But I feel still love and sympathy also for this plight. Please know more about the subject.
Swamiji, there's Rajdeep Ghosh from Maharashtra. He has sent 2 questions. Dear Swamiji, please accept my humble and loving pranams. My question is, the first question is, how can the teachings of Bhagavad Gita and Upanishads help people who are less privileged in society? Less privileged in society and who lack proper education to read or think intellectually, who are mostly engaged in working as daily wage earners, trying to make their ends meet. How can these people benefit from these 2 great scriptures? I beg for pardon if the question is not phrased appropriately. He has one more question, Swamiji.
Wait. Let me deal with it. Is it connected with this?
Not really, no. Different.
See, this knowledge does not call for any intelligence at all. Please understand it. Please understand it. This knowledge can be translated to the poor people in their own language. I sometimes address the young children. In Jamshedpur, I went to address the children. At the end of my talk, they say, see what Swamiji says? Every one of us has everything which all the others have in them. I said, you have a body. Sri Rama and Sri Krishna also had a body. And they have a mind. They had a mind. You also have the mind. They have an intelligence that also you have. And they had the soul, the great soul, that also you have. So what is the difference between you and the other? Look straight into the eyes of the people and talk. Never feel that you are low and less. This knowledge fills you so much that you feel confident. That confidence the president of a country like America may not have. What do you think of having this confidence? See, take Faraday, take Einstein. Did any one of them have anything more than a body, mind, intelligence and soul? You also have. Therefore, in what way are you inferior? And what are the rich people and the resourceful people doing? Say, what did I do, people like us? What did Nutun Swamiji and Ma, what did they do? And what are the brahmacharinis here? They were all very well placed. Teaching professors and this, that and all. They decided to leave everything and become poor. Become poor. Poverty is the greatest enrichment. Why don't you explain it to people? If you go to the villagers are much more happy than the urban people. Any shock they are able to absorb much better, much faster. Even the death of a young person, they reconcile with it very easily and fast. In terms of real wisdom, the villages are more blessed than the cities. What is the spirit of sannyasa? To dispossess everything and be on the streets. About 65, 66 years back, I left everything and I was on the streets of India. I always say, ever since then, I am greeted by the streets of India and graced by the Providence. Greeted by the streets of India. Even today, the Swamiji is like that. I am greeted by the streets. I am graced by Providence. The fullness that I experience does not come from money, does not come from the body, does not come from the world. I don't need a speck of matter from the whole creation. Not a speck. Not a speck. This knowledge is sung by the poor people in their folklore. Our Ramayana and Mahabharata, you go around the whole of India. It is sung in folklore. Our country is great. I am very sorry that we are not able to assess the greatness of our country. You go around and see. Unfortunately, in the wake of modernism, in the wake of civilization, we are losing hold of this great culture. Who told you that to be peaceful and contented? We ask our workers here sometimes. They will say, Swamiji, we have only one prayer and one desire. Let us have enough of health so that they can come and serve like this. The moment we come here in the morning, we are feeling extremely happy. Not coming here puts us into trouble. Their ambitions are only that much. I ask you a question, which rarely I have asked people. Imagine a poor family, a good-looking girl. A marriage has been fixed for her. A pretty boy they have got. And the whole marriage is being celebrated spending something like 5,000 rupees borrowing. At the same time, there is a super rich man celebrating the marriage of his daughter. I don't know whether that daughter is so good looking. They have somehow got an equally compatible, a rich son-in-law. Though the son-in-law was rich, whether he was otherwise compatible, I don't know. Both marriages are being celebrated. And the wedding garland is given, is put on the neck of the other. Can you tell me, if you measure the joy of the poor mother and the rich mother, will there be a difference? This should answer your question. As far as I am able to understand, there will be no difference. The less resourceful people have corresponding standards. Their expectations are less. So she has got a good brother-in-law, suitable to manage. Everything is okay. They are very happy. 50 people have come for the marriage. All of them had their sumptuous meal. Everybody said, very good, very good, very good choice, and went away. She was very happy. The other person also, with 5,000 people coming and crores of rupees being spent. When it comes to a question of joy, the joy the joy is a coordinate of our mind, not money. She also had a joy which her mind extended. Our country is great, my dear souls. Don't think that the philosophy has been born from out of the riches. It is not like that. The seeker, he can be a poor man. He can also be a rich man. He can be an educated man. He can be otherwise also. This knowledge is universal. Striyo Vaishyas Tatha Shudra Tebi Yanti Param Gadim. Krishna has said, Striyo Vaishyas Tatha Shudra Tebi Yanti Param Gadim Yebisyuhu Papayonayaha. Even the sinful souls can pick up this and become extremely blessed. I think you should go into details. I am only discussing one portion and one level of the knowledge, because I am generally used to that. But I talk for the poor people also, for the lesser resourceful people. We have a Srimad Bhagavata Tattva Samiksha Satram, where we have an audience of a few thousands every day. There I take Srimad Bhagavatam, explain one verse after the other. There I will not bring so much of jnana, but I will bring all these principles. You know, I am a very serious talker, as you can find me. And the people have great appreciation for this Swamiji in the Naimisharanyam sessions. They look to what I am speaking. Now I have started taking Bhagavad Gita. And most of the audience are not very highly educated. Some people will be there. Don't underestimate our people. This philosophy, provided there is a proper exponent, everybody will come borrowing ears to hear. Borrowing ears to hear. But you should hold it in a proper manner. But we are not able to get good speakers who will speak the essence, the Srimad Bhagavatam itself, in whatever principles and values and truths are propounded there. We wanted them to be discussed in a threadbare manner. But we are not able to get speakers. They are only conventional speakers who will bring out the mythological content of the text. That's all. But some people are coming because our platform has become a prestigious platform there. People want to come and talk. So there are a group of people who listen to the talks and they come to a proper judgment and then invite them. So I don't agree with the statement that how can this be made available to the ordinary people? Why not? It is there in Ramayana, it is there in Srimad Bhagavatam, it is there in Mahabharata. Everywhere this knowledge is exposed. May not be in this manner. This classical exposition also is there, that's all. Next question. We shall stop now. I propose to take a portion from Yoga Vasishtha Ramayana also during these sessions. I don't know whether I shall be able to take it tomorrow, at least day after tomorrow. Today is the 4th day. 3 more days are there. So either tomorrow or day after, don't miss it. It is entering into the mental arena. Entering into the mental arena and try to reach where you want. Reach where you want. That is going to be the subject of discussion. It is from Yoga Vasishtha Ramayana, particularly this book called Quietude of the Mind. It is a condensed version of the Upashama Prakarana of Yoga Vasishtha Ramayana. I would like all of you to have a copy of it and read it. Especially, if not other times available, at least before going to bed. Read about any portion, 4 or 5 pages, and then go to sleep. The same is the case with Science of Inner Redemption. 3 volumes have been published. You should see several illustrations are there, particularly the story of Chudala and Shikidwaja. It is something marvelous. after getting their realization, this Shigidwaja, he was under a delusion. He went to the forest and started doing hardcore penance. But his wife had been illumined, Chudala. So she somehow followed him and engaged him in different types of conversation and finally illumined him. After getting illumination, both of them went back and then they ruled the kingdom for another period. Just see, you see, what is the application of spiritual wisdom? How it can be applied and how it can delude also people. So that portion is already published, Science of Inner Redemption. 3 volumes are there. You should read all of them, not once but many times. It has got the power to occupy you till your last breath. And gift it also to your friends and make them, persuade them to read. Let them understand this wonderful knowledge that we have. After all, it is a knowledge wealth. It's not a money, economic or monetary wealth. It's a knowledge treasure. Similarly, the Science of Inner Redemption serial is continued in our journal, Vichara Setu. That also I would like every one of you to read. Samvedya varjitamanuttama mehagamadyam samvidpadam vigalanam kalayan mahatman hrudyeva tishtha kalanarahita kriyam tu kurvan akartrapadamethya shamodita shri kurvan akartrapadamethya shamodita shri. Hari 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 Om Tats Jaya Guru. We shall have the conclusional Omkara. Take your pose for it. Hari Om Tats Jaya Guru. Jaya Guru.